I've mentioned the word keyframe earlier when we were working with audio, which are these little diamonds that it's created. And the keyframes are really important because it helps change a parameter over time. With audio, we started it a little bit louder here, and over time the audio became quieter. The decibel level came down. So it's almost like if you had a soundboard, if you've ever seen a mixer where the audio technician will have a whole bunch of sliders in front of them, and you're just taking that slider and dragging it down over time. That's like having two keyframes, the starting volume and the ending volume, and then over time it's changing, and that's what keyframes allows you to do. But you can actually apply keyframes to effects as well in video parameters to make changes over time to those parameters. So to help me demonstrate this, I'm actually going to go up to File and create a new project. I'm just going to call it Keyframe. Keyframes, we'll give it plural there, and hit OK. And I have an empty project here, and I'm going to add a generator. And again, we're going to talk about generators in a second, but I'm going to add a very basic generator here. Let's go ahead and add there's a custom. Go ahead and add this custom generator to the project. I'm going to hit OK for the settings. I'm going to change this generator to be a different color. Let's actually make it this blue color here is fine. I'm going to add a second one, and I'm going to make it a different color as well. Let's make this one green, and let's do a few more. I'm going to add 2 more here just for example's sake, and let's do a red color, and then let's make the last one. What color do we not have here? Let's do yellow. Okay, so I have 4 clips here, blue, green, red, and yellow, just a couple generators added to my project. And what we're going to do is add some keyframes to these parameters. So I'm going to use Shift-Z to expand the timeline to fit these. And first of all, I'm going to select this blue color here, which just looks like the entire screen, our entire viewer here is blue. But I'm going to go and change this to the transform tool. And with keyframes, it's very important that you know where your playhead is in the position on time, because you're adding a keyframe to that moment in time. And what we're going to do with this blue color is actually change the position of it. So I'm going to go to the beginning of the clip, and I'm going to move this little blue shape here over to the left side. And to give me a little bit more space, I'm going to hide the browser. And this is great. So at the beginning of this clip, what I'm saying is make sure the blue color is over here on the left side, which is exactly where I want it. It looks good. I have the transform tool activated. So you can see at the top left, I have a keyframe button here. So I'm going to hit that button to add a keyframe. Next, I'm going to move the playhead in time to about the middle of the clip. And then I'm going to go into the viewer and drag this blue color over to roughly the center of the screen. I'm not being too specific about the position, but just over into the center here. So what has that done? Well, we can see a red line here in the middle, so it's made some kind of change. So let me go back and play this clip. And notice what happens. The blue starts on the left, and it kind of slides in onto the screen here. And then it stops, and that's all there is to it. We've added 2 keyframes to the position of this clip. And if I go into the inspector, the video inspector, you can see on the transform property, I see over the right side here, there's these little arrows. This actually lets me navigate to those keyframes. So I can see on the position parameter, this little gold diamond there on the right side lets me know a keyframe is added at that moment in time with those specific numbers. And if I click the left arrow again, I can go to the first keyframe, and you'll see where the position of this blue shape is, which is all the way off to the left side. So again, this can be kind of difficult to understand. You're seeing a lot of data here. So something else that's included with Final Cut, if you right-click or control-click on a clip, there's an option here to show video animation. You can use the shortcut Control-V as well. But when you do this, it actually brings up this pretty useful window here above the clip. And this is actually showing us all of the keyframes, in this case for the transform parameters. So I can select transform. I can even go here and select position specifically. And I'm seeing the 2 keyframes for the position. Let me unselect it and move the playhead. You can see there's a little diamond at the beginning, and there's one right here as well. So these are those keyframes in time. If you want to, you can also select one of these parameters. Like in this case, I have the transform position selected. And then I can go up to the clip menu and select solo animation. You can also use the shortcut Control-Shift-V. And what this does now, we're just seeing the position in the video animation down here, which could be a little bit more useful for seeing those keyframes. So again, scrubbing across this clip, we can see over on the left side, the blue starts there and then it goes out to this keyframe where it's in the middle of the screen. If I play this back, this transform is happening over about 5 seconds. Kind of slowly comes onto the screen there. If I wanted it to happen sooner, I can just drag this keyframe to the left. And now if I play this back, you're going to see this blue color moves in really quick. So that's how you can move a keyframe in time. Now, let's make a little bit more complicated of an effect and add some more keyframes. Right now, I can see that the square just kind of comes onto the screen and that's it. But in my case, I actually want this to shrink down. So let me go back to showing the animation. I'm going to show the transform of the position. And so while this is scrubbing onto the screen, which we'll go back and put that keyframe there, I want it to also rotate onto the screen. So we're going to add some keyframes for our rotation transform parameter. So to do that, I'm going to start at the beginning of the clip again. I'm going to go next to rotation, and I can see a keyframe actually has already been added. There's a little diamond there, so that looks perfect. And I want it to rotate as it's sliding onto the screen, but I also want the rotation to keep happening after it gets to the middle. So I'm going to drag the playhead beyond our first keyframe that we'd added there before. And then in the inspector, I'm going to add a keyframe to the rotation parameter, and I'm going to change this. And I'm going to change this up to about probably 1080. We'll have it rotate a whole bunch of times here. Cool. And that's it. That's all I have to do. If I go back and play this again, you'll see now this blue box here is rotating onto the screen. And when it gets to the middle, it continues to rotate until we hit that second keyframe. Awesome. Not too bad. Now, why did I add all these additional colors? Well, I actually want to create an effect where this blue box comes onto the screen and is only taking up 1/4 of the screen. It's going to be one color in the corner. And then I want all the other colors to show up as well. So we're going to do this by adding a bunch of keyframes to these parameters. So I'm going to select each of these colors and do Option, Command, Up arrow on the keyboard. And this is going to lift each of these colors from the primary storyline. And then I'm going to drag them back over. And I'm going to stack them in a way here. So actually, this is probably getting pretty good here. We'll just leave them like this stacked up here. Okay. And then this blue clip I'm going to drag to the right to expand it out. And it moved all my clips because they're connected, so we'll go and move those over. In the view for the timeline, I'm going to shrink down the clip height to make it a little bit easier to see each of these. And then my video animation, we can actually close this for now. We don't need to worry about seeing this. I'm going to expand the green. I'm going to expand the red. And I'm going to expand the yellow and put the yellow above just to create this little stair stacking effect. So right now, let's play this back and see what it looks like. So we have the blue color kind of rotates on in, and it rotates directly into the center of the whole clip. And then when the green color shows up, it covers up the blue color, which makes sense. When we get to the red's going to cover up the green, and so on. The yellow covers up everything. So what we actually want to do is shrink each of these colors down. So I'm going to select the color. I have the transform tool activated, and I'm just going to shrink down this clip and move it into the corner. I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of these colors. We'll select yellow, shrink it down, and I'm just creating a rough kind of a rough cut of this effect. And then we'll shrink down the red and move that into this corner. And then the blue, I want to have it be up in this top left corner here. So I'm going to select the blue clip. I'm going to show my animation again. Specifically, I'm going to show the position parameter. And I want to adjust this keyframe. So I'm going to go all the way over to this keyframe, make sure that that one is where we're at. And right now the position is here in the middle. But I'm going to change this up to the left side here. And I'm also going to change the scale because we want that to shrink down. So now, if we play this back, we can see it's rotating on in and also scaling down into the corner there. And instead of it taking up the entire screen, when the rotation ends, it's over there in the corner. Okay, not too bad. So now let's do the same thing with our green color here. We're going to do the same thing with the transform. Only this time, I like where it's positioned right now, so I'm going to change this to a couple seconds in and then hit the add keyframe button. Because that added a keyframe right here for that position. Let me go ahead and show the video animation editor. We'll show our position. And we can select this one, go up to clip and solo that animation just to see just that one animation. So I've added a keyframe here, and then I'm going to backtrack to the beginning of the clip and move this one off to the right side. And this will just slide over from right to left. Cool. And by doing that, hit the space bar. We can see that keyframe was automatically added at the beginning when I made that move. And that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to repeat those same steps. This repetition to get used to adding these keyframes. For all this, I'm going to right click, say show video animation editor. Again, you could do the control V if you wanted to as well. And then we're going to look at our position. I'm going to select it and go up to clip solo animation just to see just that animation there. And let's do this one because again, I like where it's positioned here. So I'll move this over. I'm going to hit the add keyframe button at the top left of the viewer to add it right there at the playhead position. I'll rewind back to the beginning. And this time I'm going to move it down. And I'm also going to rotate it a couple times. And by doing that, you'll notice if I play this, it's then doing that rotation onto the screen. And when it gets to the keyframe, it stops the rotation and it's positioned correctly there. Looks pretty good. And let's use the last one here. This time without seeing the video animation, I'm just going to start it from the beginning. I'm going to move it way up to the top left, hit add keyframe. I'm going to move my playhead down a little bit. Let's go way down here. It's automatically added a keyframe because I've already set one for the first parameter. I'll move the playhead a little bit more, drag this up over to the right here, drag it again, move it up to the top, drag it again, and then move it down into the corner here. So this time we added a whole bunch of keyframes for that position. So I'm going to hit done, and we can see where it's going to end up at the beginning here. Well, let's go back to the beginning of this project and watch it. And let's see if we can see what's happening here. So we have keyframes that are rotating and positioning that blue clip. The green one has some keyframes on the position parameter to slide it in. The red one has rotation and position. And then our yellow one is going to do kind of a little bit more wild of a movement where it's actually going to move down to each of the sides here. It's kind of floating all over the place. And then it comes down and settles in to its corner. So all of that was done with keyframes. Just we're adding those keyframes to those parameters to make changes over time. In this case, we just did the position of each of these. So now let's say we want to go back and edit some of those keyframes and edit the positions to refine all of this. I'm going to close the video animation for each of these. Scroll down so we have our timeline set up, and let's work on the blue clip first. So I like where the blue clip, I like the animation the blue clip does, but I don't like its specific position and spacing here. So in the inspector, I'm going to go to the position parameter, and I'm going to use this left keyframe to jump to the position keyframe to edit this one. So with this position, it actually might be in the correct position, but I want to change the scale. I know the scale is not exactly where I want it to be, so I'm going to scale this up and make it 50% for the scale. And then if I go to the end of the project, notice how the blue is filling in a lot more space. So that looks better. I'm going to do the same thing with each of these colors. For the ending keyframe, I want each of their scales to be 50%. So I'm going to hit the back button here to go back to the keyframe. And we can see it's not going to the correct keyframe here. So let me drag this over. And it's actually going to be this one on the right. And double click on the number, hit 50, return to set that in there. Same thing, we'll go to about where the rotation stops. I'll select the red, hit the back button here to go to that keyframe, and I'm going to double click and change the size to 50%. And then we'll do the same thing. I'm dragging the playhead over onto the yellow, only this time I need to go back to the beginning, because that's where the scale is, and change this to 50%. Now if I play this, we can see the blue comes in, green comes in, red comes in, and eventually the yellow comes in. So scale-wise, size-wise, they're all accurate and correct size. Now we just need to get their positions set correctly. And with these keyframes, what I want you to take away from this is when you're editing keyframes, it's very important that the playhead and the position be on the exact spot that you're trying to edit. So by doing that, we're editing a very specific keyframe. So in this case, for position is what I'm editing. So I'm going to hit the back keyframe, which goes to the previous keyframe. That way I can edit this keyframe instead of adding a new keyframe in. So for this one, I think the position is going to be right about here, about -260 for the number. I like to get round numbers. And then for the X position here, we're going to be about at 480 we'll put in here for pixels. So that looks pretty good for position. I'm going to select my red color here and do the same thing. I'm going to go back so I'm on the correct position keyframe. And I'm going to use the same numbers that I used on this yellow one so that it's getting aligned correctly. So let me show you that again. Let me go back to the yellow one, go to the ending keyframe, which is down here. So notice I used 480 and -260. For the y parameter. So if I go down to my red box here, and I'm going to select the correct keyframe, I want to line them up. So I'm going to use -260 because that's what the yellow box used. And then for my X position, we'll probably go into about -480. That gets those lined up. Let's now go down to the green. Get our position lined up here. And we're going to do 260, +260 this time. And then for our X parameter, we're going to do 480 to move that one over. And then we'll go down to blue. And with the blue one, I'm going to go back to that position keyframe. And we're going to do -480. And I believe 280 was our other number here. So now, if I go to the end, we can see all these colors are a little bit more lined up. Obviously, there's a little bit of they're not completely centered, so you can go back and mess with those numbers to get them a little bit more into place there. So that's an overview of using keyframes to animate position and rotation and scale, some of these parameters that are showing up in the inspector here. In a later video, we're going to look at more video effects and ways that you can use keyframes on other parameters to manipulate them. This may be a very confusing video that you just watched with adding these keyframes, and this is one of the most confusing things I find with learning video effects and applying these and manipulating them is working with these keyframes. So take a lot of time to practice this. You can apply keyframes to anything, shapes, titles, all kinds of different things. So don't hesitate to mess with these and get used to them. And again, in all the effects that we're going to be working with and in creating titles a little bit later, we're going to use a lot of these keyframes. So you'll get used to them over time, but this was an overview of how those are used in many different parameters by creating this little tiny animation.